The deeper it goes, the more shocking it becomes. The official statement was brief. Too brief. It announced that Yu Menglong had fallen from a building. It added that the matter had been handled. And then, almost immediately, the case went silent. Within days, the body was cremated. There was no independent autopsy, no public funeral, no extended investigation made available to the public. The announcement appeared, lingered for a moment, and vanished into the endless flow of information. For many, this would have been the end of the story. A tragic accident, a young life lost. Another name added to a long list of brief headlines. Yet for others, the speed itself felt unsettling. The process was too clean, too efficient. It left no room for questions, no space for doubt, and no time for grief to take shape. We begin here, not because of what was said, but because of what was not. In the days following Yu Menglong's death, fragments began to surface across online platforms. Screenshots, short clips, blurred photographs. None of them confirmed anything. None of them proved anything. But together, they formed a pattern of unease that refused to fade. If everything had followed standard procedure, why was there no independent medical examination? Why was the cremation carried out so quickly? And why did every attempt to ask these questions meet the same response? Silence. The rumors came next. Some claimed the body seen by authorities was not the real one. Others whispered about a frozen corpse, allegedly stored in a private space, never disclosed to the public. An exhibition, a facility, a place without a name. No verified evidence has ever confirmed these claims. Yet no official clarification ever appeared to deny them either. The absence of response only deepened the void. Yu Menglong in life was known as a quiet and gentle presence. He spoke little in interviews. He smiled often. He worked without complaint. To fans, he appeared fragile in a way that inspired protection, not suspicion. And perhaps that is why his death struck such a deep nerve. It did not feel like the loss of a distant celebrity. It felt personal, unresolved, unfinished. As days turned into weeks, the internet did what formal channels would not. It began to remember every interview he had given, every behind-the-scenes clip, every glance caught on camera during his final appearances. People slowed the footage. They analyzed his expressions. They compared dates, injuries, and schedules. What began as mourning slowly transformed into collective doubt. And beneath all of it lay a single, persistent question. Not who was responsible, not even how it happened, but something far more disturbing. If there was truly nothing to hide, why did the truth need to disappear so quickly? From this moment on, the story no longer belonged to official statements. It belonged to memory, speculation, and the growing fear that what was buried may never have been meant to rest. To understand why Yu Menglong's death unsettled so many people, we must step backward in time. Long before the night he fell, his body had already begun to tell a different story. A quiet one. A story written not in words, but in injuries that accumulated with disturbing consistency. Publicly, Yu Menglong was known as disciplined and professional. He rarely complained. He rarely drew attention to himself. Crew members described him as someone who finished his scenes even when he should have been resting. He apologized when he was hurt, as if pain were an inconvenience to others rather than a warning to himself. At the time, these traits were praised as dedication. Only later did they begin to feel like something far more dangerous. The first major injury occurred during an action scene. Suspended by a wire more than 10 meters above the ground, Yu Menglong fell when the harness failed. The impact shattered his leg. Surgeons inserted 4 steel pins to stabilize the bone. Recovery was slow. Pain was constant. Yet within months he returned to filming. There was no public investigation into the equipment failure. No formal accountability. The incident was categorized as an accident and quickly forgotten. Then came the second injury. During another production, a prop sword struck him across the face. The blade came dangerously close to his eye. For a brief moment, permanent blindness was a real possibility. Again, no official explanation followed. The incident disappeared into internal reports that were never made public. As time passed, the pattern intensified. During a public safety campaign, chemical smoke caused severe burns. On a variety show, he collapsed on stage due to hypoglycemia after filming for several consecutive days without proper rest. Each incident, viewed in isolation, appeared unfortunate but explainable. Together, they formed something far more unsettling. What frightened observers was not only the severity of the injuries but their frequency. The timeline left little room for recovery. Pain overlapped with obligation. Healing was interrupted by the next project. And always, Yu Menglong returned with the same quiet smile. Behind-the-scenes footage from his final years reveals moments that fans would later scrutinize, frame by frame. His posture stiffened when cameras moved unexpectedly. His gaze shifted, not toward the lens, but behind it. In slowed recordings, some viewers claimed he appeared to freeze for a fraction of a second, as if anticipating something unseen. At the time, these details were dismissed as overanalysis. After his death, they felt like warnings no one had understood. As online investigators retraced his filming schedule, a troubling correlation emerged. Several of the most serious injuries occurred during projects involving the same overlapping group of individuals. Production teams changed. Locations shifted. But certain names appeared again and again. This alone did not prove intent. Yet it challenged the idea of randomness. One anonymous post from a former crew member described an incident that never made it into any report. According to the account, safety harnesses on a set outside Beijing were replaced shortly before filming began. No one knew who authorized the change. When an accident occurred, responsibility dissolved into confusion. No disciplinary action followed. The project moved on. What he went through was no longer an accident. One widely shared comment read, "It was a message." This interpretation spread rapidly. Some believed the injuries were warnings. Others thought they were tests of endurance. A few suggested something darker, that someone was trying to force compliance, or escape, or silence. There was no evidence to confirm any of these theories. But the body, marked again and again, refused to support the idea of coincidence. Looking back, many now believe that Yu Menglong's true struggle did not begin with his fall. It began much earlier, carried quietly through hospital corridors, rehearsals, and studio lights. Each wound became a fragment of a larger narrative that no one was allowed to tell in full. By the time of his death, the body that fell was already exhausted, already damaged, already bearing the history of impacts that no official statement would ever connect. And as the public began to ask whether these injuries were warnings rather than misfortune, a far more dangerous question followed. If these were messages, then who was sending them? As doubts surrounding Yu Menglong's injuries deepened, public attention slowly shifted away from his body and toward the people who stood closest to him near the end. Not witnesses in the legal sense, not suspects in any official capacity, simply names that kept appearing at the edges of unanswered questions. 3 figures, 3 separate paths, each leading into the same silence. The first name surfaced almost immediately. On the morning Yu Menglong fell, a resident of the apartment complex later recalled a strange detail. Amid the confusion below the building, a man rushed toward the scene and covered Yu Menglong's face with a coat. At the time, the resident assumed he was part of an emergency response team. Only later, after photographs circulated online, did recognition set in. The man, according to the witness, was Xiaomachi. The account spread rapidly. Xiaomachi was not a stranger. He was a singer who had risen to prominence alongside Yu Menglong years earlier. The two were once described as inseparable, partners in ambition, symbols of a hopeful generation. Yet that closeness only intensified the questions. Why was he there so quickly? Why was his first instinct to conceal rather than assist? No official statement addressed the claim. Xiaomachi himself offered no explanation. Days later, a selfie he posted ignited another wave of speculation. He wore dark sunglasses. In the reflection of the lenses, some viewers believed they saw the faint outline of a bound figure suspended behind him. The image was blurred, the interpretation subjective. Still, the internet dissected every pixel. Xiaomachi remained silent. Instead of clarifying, he changed his profile background to a drawing that unsettled many who saw it. The image depicted a small figure submerged in water, a dog biting into a leg, one injured eye. Along the edge of a pool, a single word appeared: dreamers. Observers began drawing connections. Yu Menglong had once injured his eye. He was known to adore his dog. He had been described by fans as a dreamer. The symbolism was never confirmed. Yet the timing transformed the artwork into something ominous. The dreamer, some whispered, was already gone. No evidence emerged. No conclusions were reached. But from that moment forward, Xiaomachi's name remained fixed at the center of online suspicion. The second name entered the narrative more quietly. Song Yan, an actress, reportedly close to Yu Menglong, during his final days, posted a brief message online on October 24th. Shortly afterward, she vanished from all public platforms. No updates, no responses, no appearances. At first, her disappearance drew little attention. Then people began to look closer. Brands attempted to contact her regarding contracts. Production teams sought explanations. None received a reply. Soon after, a group claiming to be unpaid online promoters came forward with a strange allegation. They said Song Yan had hired them to manage her public image. After the work was completed, payment never arrived. The dispute seemed minor until it opened a door to something far more disturbing. An anonymous post appeared on a foreign platform, claiming that files recovered from Song Yan's computer contained a document titled High-Level Entertainment Service List. According to the post, it named more than 600 individuals. Even more alarming was a second spreadsheet, allegedly labeled Death List. 37 names, divided into 3 categories: processed, accidents, pending closure. Next to Yu Menglong's name, a large red mark. The authenticity of the documents was never verified. No source confirmed their existence. Yet the rumors spread faster than any correction could follow. Fear moved where facts could not. If such a list existed, then Yu Menglong's death was not an isolated event. It was part of a pattern. The third name rarely appeared in public discussion, yet it carried the greatest weight. Ru Guangguang was described as a figure behind the curtain. Corporate records uncovered by online investigators linked him to a vast medical network, including private hospitals and pharmaceutical subsidiaries. Facilities that, according to unconfirmed reports, were not required to disclose detailed body handling procedures. Some posts went further, claiming Yu Menglong had been detained or mistreated at a private residence connected to this network. When Yu Menglong's family requested an official investigation, the case was declined. Shortly afterward, related keywords began disappearing from search engines. From that point on, Ru Guangguang's name became a symbol rather than an accusation. A representation of the kind of power believed capable of erasing questions before they were ever fully asked. 3 names, 3 lines of inquiry. None produced answers. Each ended the same way: silence. And as the public confronted that silence, another realization took hold. When power is strong enough to prevent truth from being spoken, what chance does the truth have to survive at all? As the 3 names dissolved into silence, the investigation appeared to stall. No new witnesses stepped forward. No documents surfaced. The questions multiplied, but answers did not follow. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the story would fade into the familiar pattern of unresolved speculation. Then a sound emerged. Not an image, not a document, a voice. The audio clip was short, raw, unstem. It circulated quietly at first, passed from one private group to another before reaching public platforms. In it, a man's voice could be heard speaking rapidly, breath uneven, tone strained. The words were fragmented. Then came sudden noise, movement, raised voices overlapping one another, a heavy impact, and silence. No official source acknowledged the recording. No authority confirmed its origin. Yet for many listeners, the emotional weight was immediate. The voice did not sound rehearsed. It did not sound staged. It sounded afraid. Soon after the clip spread, an unrelated event drew unexpected attention. Fan Shiki, a public figure known for his casual online presence, began a routine live stream. The atmosphere was light. He laughed. He greeted viewers. Nothing appeared unusual. Then the comment section changed. One message began repeating itself, again and again, flooding the screen with unsettling precision. "Help me. My hands are too weak." The phrasing matched words rumored to appear in the audio clip. Fans referred to Fan Shiki affectionately by a nickname. But that night, the repetition felt different. It felt intentional, coordinated. When Fan Shiki noticed the comments, his expression shifted. He paused. His smile tightened. After several seconds, he snapped at the viewers, asking whether they were sick. Then he changed the subject and continued as if nothing had happened. The moment passed, but it did not disappear. In the days that followed, social media platforms erupted with analysis. Comparisons between the voice in the audio and Fan Shiki's public recordings began circulating. An unnamed group claiming to be independent experts overseas released a report stating a 99.57% similarity between the 2 voices. The methodology was never disclosed. No recognized institution verified the findings. Still, the number itself carried power. Precision created belief. Debate consumed the platforms. Some dismissed the analysis as fabricated. Others treated it as confirmation. A single comment captured the collective unease. If that number is real, then what are we hearing? A final plea for help or a performance designed to deceive millions? No answer followed. From that point on, Fan Shiki's online appearances were marked by the same pattern. Each stream, each post, Each public interaction was met with the same haunting demand: return the truth to Yu Menglong. The words became a chant, not accusatory, not specific, simply insistent. The case entered a gray zone. There were no charges, no statements, no clarifications. Only fragments suspended between belief and denial. 2 months passed, then more. Yu Menglong's name remained unresolved, not because of scandal, but because too many elements refused to align. Blurry surveillance footage showing empty stairwells. Injuries that never received explanation. Clothing with messages that read like farewells only after it was too late. Names that appeared briefly before, vanishing from public record. Each detail alone meant little. Together, they formed a structure of doubt that could not be dismantled. No one was questioned. No investigation was announced. Law enforcement remained silent. Traditional media moved on. Meanwhile, social networks burned with desperation. Some believed Yu Menglong was buried in a remote location. Others insisted his real body had never been recovered. Every theory lacked proof, yet none could be fully dismissed. A comment left by a fan before it was deleted captured the prevailing sentiment. We do not need a criminal. We need an explanation. Yu Menglong was remembered not as a symbol, but as a person. A young man who sang softly in small studios, who smiled shyly when praised, who carried himself with gentleness in an industry known for cruelty. He left behind more than unanswered questions. He left behind a void filled with erased posts, silenced witnesses, and altered identities. Those who once stood beside him faded from view. Some changed names. Some disappeared entirely. Accounts were locked, footage removed, clues erased as if they had never existed. And yet something endured: memory. Because memory does not require permission to survive. And as millions continued to remember, to question, and to refuse closure without truth, one final realization emerged from the darkness. If no one is allowed to speak, then remembering may be the only form of resistance left. In the absence of conclusions, the story of Yu Menglong did not end. It lingered, not as scandal, not as spectacle, but as an unresolved weight carried by millions who refused to forget. What remained were not answers, but contradictions. A body cremated too quickly. Injuries that accumulated without explanation. Names that surfaced briefly before retreating into silence. Each element alone could be dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern that no official narrative ever addressed. There was never an announcement declaring the case closed. There was simply nothing more to say. Authorities offered no follow-up. Institutions moved forward. Public attention was expected to fade. Yet memory does not obey instruction. It persists where documentation fails. We are often taught that truth requires evidence to survive. But history suggests otherwise. In many cases, truth survives because people refuse to let questions disappear. In this case, remembrance became the only remaining form of inquiry. Screenshots replaced statements. Archived clips replaced testimony. The public did what formal channels would not. It remembered. No criminal was named. No guilt was proven. This was not a trial. It was an examination of silence itself. Of what happens when power, fear, and procedure align so perfectly that questions lose their place to exist. When information vanishes, not through denial, but through absence. Some believe Yu Menglong was buried quietly in a place no one will ever find. Others insist that the body the public was told to accept was never the real one. These claims remain unverified. They exist in the space between doubt and belief. But the persistence of these theories reveals something deeper: a collective refusal to accept closure without understanding. Those who once stood closest to Yu Menglong are no longer visible. Some have vanished from public life. Some have altered their identities. Digital traces have been erased, accounts locked, posts deleted, witnesses silenced not by force, but by fear. The record has been cleaned. But cleaning a record does not erase what it once contained. A comment left by a fan before disappearing captured the essence of the entire case. We do not need a criminal. We need an explanation. It was not a demand for punishment. It was a plea for coherence, for acknowledgement, for the basic assurance that a life did not vanish without meaning. Yu Menglong was not remembered for controversy. He was remembered for gentleness, for quiet discipline, for a presence that never sought to dominate the frame. His absence now occupies more space than his voice ever did in life. And that absence continues to raise questions no one has been willing to answer. They can remove posts. They can censor keywords. They can silence witness and erase records. But memory resists erasure. It does not require permission. It does not fade on command. It survives in fragments carried by those who refuse to let the story end prematurely. Justice is not always immediate. Sometimes it is delayed. Sometimes it is buried, but it is rarely destroyed. Justice is not gone. It is only sleeping beneath the ice.